Believe it or not, I haven't learned of the show until very recently. I came across it for the first time when I was working on a top 10 list, trying to think of the top 10 shows that had really good ideas but they didn't live up to their potential, so they deserved a remake. I was struggling to figure out enough shows to fill out the list, and then someone suggested Robotboy, and apparently I was one of the only 2 people on Earth who had never actually watched the show before, and as you can tell, it's not very good. From what I understand, the show was severely overplayed back in the mid-2000s. Not as much as Teen Titans Go is now, or Johnny Test was, but it was definitely on for a large portion of the day, so I figured that I had some catching up to do. Some people called it Cartoon Network's answer to My Life as a Teenage Robot, so in a way, I kinda got my hopes up. Then the G-Man threw up all over them. I have seen plenty of the show, and I know that it is of very poor quality. The concept of the show is revealed right in the intro. A young boy who is absolutely not Mac from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends writes a letter to the greatest robotic scientist in the world, Professor Moshimo. Moshimo has created a robot named Robotboy because he's not very creative. But he's afraid of his rival and archenemy, Dr. Kamikaze, taking Robotboy for himself. So instead of hiring some extra security, Moshimo gives Robotboy to Tommy. Why does he do that? That's a very good question. As far as I can tell, it's never actually explained. The intro says that Tommy is Moshimo's biggest fan, and that's usually the explanation given when I ask. But that's a stupid explanation for a variety of reasons. Number 1, it's never actually established in the show. But number 2, could you imagine that if you just wrote to, a rock star saying that you were their biggest fan ever despite not having any of their merchandise, and then being taken by them on a worldwide tour? Even for a cartoon, this is ludicrous. But the reason why this concept is so stupid is because Tommy is very shit at what he was tasked with doing, keeping Robotboy a secret. This plot point is abandoned fairly quickly. Tommy does keep Robotboy a secret from his parents, and that causes some plots like in Cleaning Day, but Robotboy is frequently taken out of public and is seen by just about everyone, constantly. Totally Spies understood secrecy better than this show. In one episode, Robotboy goes to a robot fighting tournament, and is seen by thousands of people. In another episode, he's taken to a pizza parlor. And Robotboy does have the ability to disguise himself, he just doesn't. Hell, in one episode, Napoleon Dynamite shows up and makes a bunch of knockoff Robotboys. There's an episode where Robotboy gets famous on the internet. You wanna hear another secret? The sky is blue. Not helping the show is the fact that Tommy is dull as a doorknob. If there's a character that I can accurately describe as having no personality, it would be Tommy. In every single episode that I have seen, I can't think of something that made him stick out from the quote-unquote typical 10-year-old boy. Even other quote-unquote typical 10-year-old boys like Timmy Turner or Johnny Test do have things that they're, interested in. They have some kind of passions. They want to actually do things. Tommy doesn't engage in any hobbies. You'd think that he'd be more into computers, being Moshimo's biggest fan and all, but no, I don't think he even has a computer. Whenever Tommy gets involved in a plot, it's usually because one of his friends drags him along, and he's the one who has to nag them to stop. Speaking of friends, there's Gus, or as he would like to be called,
the G-Man.
Wake up, Mr. Freeman. Wake up and smell the ashes.
Yeah, right, I wish. Gus is actually the most annoying child character that I have ever seen in a cartoon. Let me put this into perspective. I would rather adopt DW than watch this tub of stupid lard for 5 more minutes. Gus is legitimately the worst child character that I have ever come across. This is the bottom of the barrel. This is how you do it wrong. Gus has 2 main character traits besides puking on everything. Number 1 is eating, because fat was a personality in the 2000s. And number 2, being an obnoxious prick. Even the Wikipedia page for the show says that it's Gus's fault that the good guys get frequently caught up in plans by Kamikaze. The Wikipedia page says that it's usually Gus's fault for the problems. I actually thought that Gus was Tommy's brother because I had no idea why anyone would willingly hang out with someone like Gus. The body switching episode didn't help either because Gus slept over at Tommy's house, and Tommy's parents knew and prepared exactly what Gus wanted for breakfast, and Tommy's actual brother was nowhere to be seen in that episode. But no, the show just has a major problem with keeping anything consistent. The worst part of Gus, though, by far, is his voice. When Gus speaks, glass breaks. I tried to figure out why it was so awful. It took me a while, but then I got it. Whoever is voicing Gus is trying really, really hard to get a Cartman impression almost correct. And the result is...
Oh, man, the only chip I'm interested in is the potato variety, okay?
a ruptured eardrum. Gus is also apparently Amish, because the writers don't know how the Amish works. Let me quote Wikipedia one more time. Despite coming from an Amish family, Gus is obsessed with food and video games. Despite coming from an Amish family. Is this supposed to be some kind of weird minority representation? Is it a joke? I really don't get what's going on here. And yes, I do know that some Amish do use some technology and they're not completely isolated from the rest of the world, but still, this is just confusing as all hell. Speaking of minority representation, there's Lola. You know that she's there to represent all girls because she can fly jet planes and speedboats, even though she only appears in like half the episodes. And in the episodes that she does appear, she barely has a presence. I don't think the show really understands the concept of friendship. There's a lot that the show doesn't understand. One of the most telling examples of that is in the episode Robot Girl, where the show about robots proves that it doesn't understand anything about robots. In this episode, Robot meets his female counterpart, Robot Girl. You know that it's his female counterpart because she has a bow and is pink. Two things that are absolutely important for any robot to work properly. You see, the best thing that you can do when you want to keep your super secret robot a secret is to make two of them, so your secret is a lot harder to keep. Dr. Moshimo is not a good scientist. You see, he didn't program Robot Girl with things like general knowledge, like what tag was, even though Robotboy did know what tag was. I mean, I'm sure Robotboy had a lot of time to learn it, but it shouldn't be hard to program, I don't know, an encyclopedia into a robot, especially when this is the second iteration, and it should be better than the first. No, what makes the episode truly stupid isn't the fact that Robot Girl didn't know the world around her, it's that she wasn't even programmed with the knowledge of her own abilities. She needed Robotboy to tell her that she can fly, to use any of her other robot superpowers. Okay, whatever, you want her to learn about the world around her, but why wouldn't you program the knowledge of her own abilities into a robot? Why would you not do that? Give me one logical explanation. Just one. The biggest problem with the show is that it's clear that each episode was written in just one go, with no oversight and no rewrites. Every single episode has some kind of glaring plot hole. Even if it's simple as Robotboy is supposed to be a goddamn secret. Every single episode, as far as I can tell, has a major plot hole. And that's impressive. Not helping here is the animation. This was at a time when Flash animation was taking over the world, and you could see a lot of the signs of early Flash animated shows. Characters are given body shapes that are way too obviously geometric shapes. Tommy is literally a blockhead. These are the kind of character designs that you can only really get away with if you didn't have something like Flash, that is best used to move complex shapes around. See, Flash is a puppet-based animation tool. It's used to move around puppets, so you can have these big, complex objects and move each part independently. So when your complex puppets are just simple shapes like squares and circles, it looks lazy as all fuck. I'm sorry, but I have a preconceived notion that every Flash-based animated show should look better than Phineas and Ferb, which was hand-drawn. The characters also have very thick outlines, except on their eyes, which comes across as kind of uncanny and inconsistent. It's better than the backgrounds, though. All too often, the perspective is just beyond butchered. And every house appears to be on a hill that's so steep, it is very distracting. I do not like how this show is animated. Also, Robotboy has this shine on his ears, I guess to indicate that he's made of metal, but that's not how light works. In fact, one of the first things that you learn when you're doing shading is not to do a gradient like this, even if you're shading a metallic object. A gradient like this only appears in a very specific condition. And Robotboy, and Robot Girl for that matter, are continually in different environments, moving their head around, etc. This is not how light works, and it just looks awful. What you're supposed to do is put shading in a separate layer, not make it a part of the actual object. Then there's the show's humor. Did you ever want to see a not Amish boy throw up? No? Why would you say that? Seeing a not Amish boy throw up about 20 times an episode. That's like comedy gold. I mean, you better like it because that's largely what the show has to offer. There is a surprising amount of gross out in this show for something that appeared in the mid-2000s. And if I had known about it, it would have definitely been on my worst of 2000s list. Not high up on the list, but maybe in place number 10 or 9. It's definitely worse than The Ripping Friends. I thought that we were over this gross out by 2005, but no. I mean, I guess that's all the show really had. The best jokes tend to come from characters and their personalities, and when you've got literally a robot that acts like literally a robot, a human trash can, and not applicable, what else do you have? I mean, there's one episode where Robotboy thinks that a waitress is his mother because of her hair, even though he's a robot built by Dr. Moshimo. But it's okay, because this isn't really his mother, or even a woman. It's actually a guy pretending to be a woman to get more tips at a diner, and we are not touching this one. I was introduced to the show because I was told that its concept had reboot potential, but I don't really know how accurate that is. I mean, a boy and his robot is definitely a good premise, you could do a lot with it, but a lot has been done with it. We have tons of shows with a similar premise. Everything from Astro Boy to Megas XLR. Hell, the show is called Cartoon Network's My Life as a Teenage Robot for a reason. It wasn't a shining force of creativity. I mean, it's definitely a good premise that could be reworked, but it has been. That might explain why it got so much overplay too. Yeah, have you noticed the shows that Cartoon Network overplays? Well, no, they're not usually the worst thing ever, but between this, Johnny Test, and Teen Titans Go, they're usually very derivative and a dirge of creativity. It's all often lowest common denominator. Before we end, I want to thank you guys for continuing to watch, subscribing, and ringing that bell. I know that you're probably annoyed with every YouTuber asking you to do this, but it really does help. Leaving a like and a comment also helps extraordinarily much too. It seems like YouTube lately has been weaning away the subscriptions feature altogether, and there is a very real sense of tension on the platform with many of its users. If you want to support me, please donate to my Patreon, which I've linked in the description. And if you want to follow me and actually guarantee to get a notification whenever I update, you can follow me on Twitter and on DeviantArt.